All right. Okay. See if we're getting anyone online real quick.
Comes with it.
How do you like that camera?
In here?
No, the one you bought.
Oh.
Okay.
I give it a 7 out of 10.
So today we are talking about pre and post trip inspections. What specifically that entails in terms of DOT regulation 396.11. So in the truck cab, let me pull all this up real quick. All right. So we need to do parking brakes and service brakes, including trailer brake connections, steering mechanisms, lighting devices and reflectors, tires, wheels and rims, horns, windshield wipers and mirrors, coupling devices, and emergency equipment. And then for trailer, let me pull all that up too. We need to do brakes, lighting devices, lamps, markers, and conspicuity marking material, like reflective tape. Is that what that entails? Wheels, rims, lugs, tires, airline connections, hoses and couplers, kingpin, upper coupling device, rails or support frames, and locking pins, clevises, clamps, or hooks. Now we're going to expand on each of these, kind of what that actually entails, and see what a pre and post trip actually looks like. And sliders or sliding frame locks. So that is taken from the DOT regulation 396.11, basically copied and pasted into this. So this is the requirements of DOT pre and post trips. So for the engine compartment, we start there. Want to make sure all wires are connected on the alternator and that there are no leaks on the hoses running to and from the pump. Belts on these should also be checked for cracks and frays and have a bit of free play in them between 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch. So a lot of your pre and post trip inspections are visual, but there is some hands-on stuff to do while you're doing them as well. On brakes, chambers should not be leaking air, drums should be properly mounted and secure, and the hose is rubber, so make sure it's not leaking air. Want to check the lining for oil and debris, and it should have at least 1/4 inch of friction material on it. With the brakes released and pulled by hand, slack adjuster and push rod should never move more than 1 inch. On steer tires, Sal covered this pretty well when he went over it. You need to make sure there's no damage to the tire, and tread depth needs to be reported at 5/30 seconds, correct?
Do you want to correct that?
Yeah, slack, when the brakes release, should not extend no more than 2 inches.
So is...
On maxi cans and 3/4 inch on just like steer.
Okay. Good clarification. Is that correct though on the... Alright, tire depth? And they need to be checked with an air gauge as well. We've covered that pretty well, not just kicked or pushed on. Continuing with that, these are things that should not be leaking and kept filled. So the coolant, power steering fluid, hubs, oil, and shock absorbers. If the shock absorber is leaking, it'll be at the point where the top and bottom portion of the shock meet. So you want to make sure all those things have fluids in them and they're at the fill lines. These are things that should be properly mounted and not cracked, bent, broken, or leaking. Steering column, tie rods, spring hanger, drag link, gearbox and hoses, pitman arm, and air compressor and power steering pump. Hoses should be secure at both ends as well, and the air compressor and power steering pump are in hard to see areas, but it's still important to get eyes on those with each pre and post trip inspection. Housekeeping for this department, you want to make sure all U-bolts, is that case or cast, sorry?
Castle.
Castle?
Castle.
Should be castle.
Okay, castle. Castle nuts, cotter pins, and lug nuts are all accounted for, and look for any damage to any of them. Make sure no leaf springs have shifted, and rims have no unauthorized welds on them. Lastly, you want to do a visual inspection of the ground underneath the truck, and make sure there's no leaks coming from the truck either. The next area is the coupling area. So air and electrical lines should be secure at both ends with no damage, air leaks, or exposed wires. They can also not be dragging or entangled. There needs to be enough space or clearance between the truck or mud flaps and the trailer landing gears so that they don't hit each other when you're turning. Make sure no mounting bolts are missing, the release arm and locking pin are in fully locked positions, and the skid plate is properly lubricated. Things on this area that should be properly mounted with no cracks, bends, breaks, or other damage include the platform, glad hands, apron, and kingpin. Glad hands should also have no signs of rotting or leaking air, and the locking jaws need to be physically, not visually. You need to physically put your hands on them and make sure they are fully locked around the kingpin, and there should be no space between the apron and the skid plate. The in-cab portion, air pressure gauges should build the governor cutout. You need to make sure you have a fire extinguisher, 3 red reflective triangles, and spare electrical fuses for your emergency equipment. Check both the heater and defroster work properly. Some of these things, when you get into them, you're like, do I really have to check that every single time you go out? Well, yes, because what if, say, your heater goes out and it's the middle of winter, and you didn't know because you didn't check in your pre- and post-trip, and you get stuck out there. Okay, it seems like something super trivial, but it's those little things that get you when you go out. Both air and city horns should be demonstrated to work. Left and right turn signals, 4-way flashers, and high beams need to be tested tested to light up on the dash. So this is the in-cab portion, making sure those are actually flashing on your dash. Engine oil pressure gauge and water temp gauge should rise to normal operating range. The voltmeter should be charging between 13 and 14 volts. Windshield and mirrors need to be clean and in proper adjustment before you start down the road, so don't be driving and adjust them while you're driving. And wipers and washers need to be demonstrated to work properly as well. Brake checks. So there are 3 steps to air brake checks. 1, applied pressure test. You need to build the air pressure to governor cutout. Put the truck in its lowest gear. Turn off the engine and immediately turn it back on. Push in the tractor and trailer valves to release the parking brakes. Then push and hold the brake pedal to allow the gauges to stabilize. Check the primary and secondary PSI and listen for air leaks while doing this. Number 2, you pump down on the brake pedal until the warning light and buzzer comes on, which is usually at or before 60 psi. And then 3rd, you're going to pump down on the brake pedal until the tractor and trailer protection valves pop out, usually between 20 and 40 psi. For parking brakes, over on the right side there, we have our trailer parking brakes. You're going to set the trailer brake and release the tractor brake and tug lightly on the trailer to make sure it's working. Then you're going to switch it and set the tractor brake and release the trailer brake and tug it to make sure it's working. For service brakes, you're going to release both of those brakes, the trailer and the tractor brakes, drive at idle speed, apply the service brake and come to a complete stop, making sure that it doesn't pull to either the left or the right while you're pressing on those brakes. Last, we have our light checks. So you're going to check these 5 areas: the front of the truck, both sides of the truck, the rear of the truck, both sides of the trailer, and the rear of the trailer for these 5 functions: the left turn signal, the right turn signal, your 4-way flashers, your high and low beams, and your brake lights. You also need to check the license plate lights, make sure those are going to work at night or anytime, and make sure all your reflective tape, again, is in good condition, making sure you're conspicuous at night, people can see you. For you online, safety focus phrase is, this is a proper pre- and post-trip. Sal, you're up.
Going through with that post-trip, pre-trip, was the 5th wheel. Again, pretty basic, pretty common things that everyone looks at. However, we did find some issues on a few, and I just want to bring them to light here so that we're aware. It's quick to take a quick look and get a good idea, but sometimes things are missed, and well, these are it. As you can see, this one here is missing a pin completely, and it had started to wear a little bit on the edge there, and I got another picture of it. The reason I wanted to show this one here in particular is because, well, there's no pin in it. Pretty easy to miss. I mean, pretty easy to see, but I thought it was difficult to miss, but I was amazed. It was missed, so... If you get a closer look here, the reason I went close up on this one is because there was a dirt accumulation. That leads me to believe that this had been missing for some time, for dirt to pile up inside there. And you can see the wear in the bottom there. It started to grind out on the metal. The bad thing about this whole thing is this was one of ours. and it came in like that after we dropped the trailer, which means it was running like this. These are the kind of things that cause, the inevitable, very bad things. So that's why it's imperative that these things are checked very closely. Again, it's easy to go through things fast. Speed will come, but right now this is something we need to slow down and take a little more focus on. So when you don't do that and you let it go and you become complacent, the end result is that when things are overlooked, we start to lose pieces of the whole unit. And as you can see on this one, the
saddle mount.
What's that?
Saddle mount.
Well, the saddle one as well, but I mean, I'm just talking about the pinion and everything on top, the bushing. When they took it off, this is what they saw. The whole thing was tore off and gone. What had happened is it got so hot from friction, it burned the bushing. And it had been rocking back and forth. That's why the metal's chipped up like that. Now, I can't say this didn't happen here. This was in Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas, including the damage. So, that being said, just something to keep an eye on for next time. Again, we're all trying to work together on this. It's something that happened. It's something we caught. The whole point is we need to stay a little more focused, take our time. Again, these pre-trips aren't just for you guys. They're for the people that you're driving by too. So just keep that in mind. But that's all I got. Thanks.
So a reminder with these pre and post trips, all this information is also information you guys needed to know and took tests on in order to even receive your CDLs. So you've tested through all of this stuff. It's stuff you should know. It's always a good reminder though, since some of you, it's been quite a few years since you've gotten your CDLs. So I know this information was gone through quickly, but again, this is stuff you should know as a CDL driver. So if you do need any of this information and in how to do a proper pre and post trip, I will have all of this for you. So if you need to get in a routine, make sure you're doing all of the steps and doing it all correctly each time you go out there. Let me know and we'll get it taken care of. Again, I don't have any operations notes this week, so that will do it. And I'm just, last time they said something real quick. I know last week they were still looking for some drivers in Texas, so if you're interested in that, reach out to Gilby, and we can go from there. All right, thanks guys. Have a safe week. We will see you next week. Sign the roster before you leave.
Texas.